You weren't a customer, just some limping old man who stunk of street smoke and stale time. That's what the manager muttered when he shoved the mop bucket your way and told you the bathrooms were for paying guests only. You didn't argue. You never did. You just tipped your old cap, nodded like you understood, and stepped back into the chill wind outside that main street cafe, holding your leg like it might betray you again. But what he didn't see, what no one in that room saw, was the embossed brass tag under your collar that still read Colonel J. Knox, blood type OPOS. No surrender. He didn't see the two folded letters in your back pocket, signed years apart by generals no longer in uniform, but still carrying your name in their top free. He didn't know that your duffel, frayed and oil-stained, had once been flown by Blackhawks through weather that turned men to ghosts. He just saw another broken shadow asking for a chair. And 5 minutes later, he saw something else. Something that landed hard enough to shake the coffee cups off the counters. If you believe respect isn't earned by your clothes, but by your character, like and subscribe. Because this story, it's the kind that reminds us why you should always look twice before judging someone who walks slow. It started that morning, like most in downtown Easton, hurried, indifferent, caffeinated. The cafe was already buzzing with the pre-workday crowd, laptops open, earbuds in, complicated coffee orders being barked from behind carefully curated beards and ironic tattoos. Maya was halfway through her shift at the register when she saw him. Old man, maybe late 70s, gray beard trimmed but coarse, eyes shaded by a tattered cap, with an air cavalry pin dulled by years of sun. His walk was deliberate but shaky, each step clearly painful, favoring his right leg. He leaned hard on a cane that had a marine emblem carved into the shaft, not the cheap kind you buy online, but the kind that's etched by hand during deployment. The duffel on his shoulder hung heavy, the kind that only people who've lived out of bags truly know how to carry. He walked in quietly, didn't say a word, just nodded toward the counter and turned toward the side hallway, where the restroom and extra seating were. That's when Chase saw him. Young, loud, latte-colored button-down stretched too tight across a chest he didn't earn. The kind of manager who liked to pretend he was keeping order in a place that never really saw disorder to begin with. "Sir," Chase called out, already posturing for the audience behind him. "Restrooms for customers only." The vet paused, didn't speak, just nodded slowly and turned to sit on the bench near the exit, outside in the wind. Chase added, louder, "Look, we're not a shelter, all right." Some folks in line chuckled. A woman with a yoga mat smirked. No one intervened. But Maya didn't laugh. Something in the old man's movements, the discipline, the calm, made her hesitate. She saw how carefully he set the duffel beside him, how his eyes scanned the parking lot like he was still on perimeter watch, and how, even in discomfort, he didn't beg, didn't bark, he just endured. She asked Chase quietly if she could bring him water. "He's not a guest," Chase barked. "Let him figure it out like everyone else." That's when the old man reached into his coat and unfolded a notebook. Worn, leather-bound, military field standard. Maya caught a glimpse of sketches inside. Not doodles, grids. Hand-drawn aerial layouts, down to guard rotations and field reserves. She'd seen things like it before, from her brother's field manual during his deployment. That's when her phone buzzed. A short message from her brother in Logistics Command. "Tell everyone to clear the parking lot. Commander's extraction inbound." Her blood ran cold. Extraction? From here? She stepped outside and gently knelt by the old man. "Sir," she said, voice low, "are you waiting for someone?" He didn't look up, just nodded. "Told them I'd be here at 0900. Never been late in 42 years. She started to respond, but that's when the wind shifted. That unmistakable thrum in the air, rotor blades. Loud, low, approaching fast. And within seconds, the entire street changed. Coffee cups rattled on tables. Alarms on parked cars began to chirp. Then the shadow passed over the glass. A Blackhawk, gray, massive, and marked with insignia. It descended like thunder in a bottle, landing hard across the rear lot of the building, kicking up debris and disbelief. Customers scrambled to the windows. Chase ducked behind the counter. Maya stood frozen. Out stepped 4 MPs, then a uniformed officer carrying a hardback case. He looked around, spotted the old man, and saluted hard. The officer marched up to him, saying loud enough for the whole street to hear, "Colonel Knox, sir. Relate. My apologies." Chase turned pale. A woman dropped her phone. The Blackhawk crew stood at attention. Colonel Jacob A. Knox rose slowly, picking up his cane, not for weakness, but for balance earned the hard way. He nodded toward Maya and said, "Appreciate the water, young lady," then turned to Chase without even a glance of contempt. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said flatly. "You just never learned how to see people." He boarded the helicopter. No fanfare, no music, just stunned silence. As the blades roared back to life, Maya looked down at the table where his notebook had briefly rested. A napkin remained, folded with a phrase written in steady, block letters. "Don't mistake quiet for invisible." And when the Blackhawk lifted off into the sky, Easton didn't feel quite the same. And neither did Chase. The rotor wash had barely settled before the silence hit harder than the helicopter ever could, blanketing the cafe like a fog of shame and memory. The only sound was the steady squeak of Maya's shoes against the freshly mopped floor as she walked numbly to the booth where customers had gathered moments ago to laugh at an old man, now scattered, quiet, heads lowered like students caught cheating. Chase was still pale, standing stiff at the counter like a man who just realized he had bet against the wrong side of history. He said, "Colonel," someone muttered, but Maya wasn't listening. She was already retracing every second, every clue, every posture, every word the man had spoken, or rather, the ones he hadn't. The crew had been gone for less than 5 minutes when her phone buzzed again, this time not a vague logistical alert, but a name she hadn't expected. Jacob A. Knox, retired. Urgent access clearance, redacted. Her brother followed with a message, "Maya, you met him? Don't talk about it. Just thank him if you ever see him again." She stared at the screen, her heart thudding. Colonel Jacob A. Knox. The name sounded like thunder if you'd ever served, a ghost, a myth. A man mentioned in some of the black file training briefings her brother once said were the kind you get locked out of just for asking about. Back inside, the energy had shifted, not just embarrassed, but haunted. People had watched a man get mocked for limping, then watched a military transport land for him in real time. One of the baristas, Tommy, whispered, "I just told him we were out of the good napkins," like it was a confession. Even the loud girl with the yoga mat who had laughed earlier was now wiping tears from under her sunglasses. But Chase? Chase was different. Something about his posture wasn't just stunned, it was defensive, brittle. "We didn't know," he said too loudly, as if someone had accused him of something. It's not like he said who he was. His voice cracked. "How are we supposed to know?" Maya didn't answer. "Because that was the point. You weren't supposed to need a helicopter landing in your parking lot to treat someone like a human being." That night, the cafe's usual after-hours crew cleaned in near silence. Maya stayed late, replaying the scene in her head, again and again. She opened the logbook from the register drawer and, buried between delivery schedules and syrup invoices, found the napkin. She hadn't noticed it before, folded into the drawer like a forgotten receipt. She unfolded it slowly, heart-catching when she read the words written in that same, deliberate military script. "Thank you for seeing me, JK." 3 days passed. Then a week. The story had spread, not viral, not loud, but underground. In veteran circles, quiet message boards, mid-level briefings. One of Maya's customers, a reserve intel guy, came in the next Friday and left a challenge coin next to the napkin without saying a word. Another man in civilian contractor gear asked if the colonel came here often. Maya said no, and he nodded solemnly like that made perfect sense. On the 7th day, a package arrived at the cafe. No name, no return address. Just a military field crate, real, dented, with freight tags marked for civilian handoff, authorized. Chase didn't want to open it, said it might be a prank. Maya ignored him and pried it open with a butter knife. Inside, a perfectly folded American flag, a sealed letter marked for the curious, and an old, hardbound field manual with handwritten annotations in the margins initialed JK. The letter was addressed to whoever saw me first. It wasn't long, but it hit like a freight train. "I don't wear medals. I don't chase recognition. I walk slow because I gave the fast steps away to men who didn't make it back. I don't talk much because too many of their voices still echo. But if you're reading this, then someone remembered something besides my limp. And that's enough. Because they laughed at me until I was remembered. That's how the world works. Until someone breaks the pattern. Thank you for breaking it." Maya's hands shook. Chase stepped back, suddenly looking very small under the soft hum of cafe lights. "We can't just sit on this," he said, almost pleading. "We should call someone. Make a post. Tag the army. But Maya knew this wasn't a story meant for clout. It was a memory offered gently, only to those willing to carry it with reverence. Over the next few days, the cafe changed. No policy updates, no formal announcements. Just things shifted. Veterans began to sit longer. No one rushed them. A new bench was added outside, inscribed quietly on a small plaque. For those who walk slow, we see you. And at the far end of the counter, behind a glass frame, sat that napkin, right where the colonel left it. Because sometimes the most powerful service a man can perform isn't on a battlefield. Sometimes it's showing the world that dignity doesn't retire. It just learns to walk with a cane. It happened 2 weeks later, with no warning, no sound of rotors, no dramatic music to announce it, just the bell above the cafe door chiming at 6:58 a.m. When only Maya was prepping the espresso bar and the sunrise hadn't even reached the street yet, and stepped a man in a long charcoal coat with gold trim at the cuffs and an insignia pin only senior officers ever wore. And behind him came 2 others in silent lockstep, one carrying a sealed case, the other holding a folded leather binder. The man stepped forward, removed his cap, and introduced himself, General Caleb Armitage, Joint Task Command, here on behalf of Central Command's Office of Legacy Recognition. Maya blinked, unsure if she was dreaming or if the military had just walked into her life again. "We're here," the general said gently, because the colonel left one last instruction. He turned toward the old booth in the back, the one Knox had paused near when he came in that first morning. He wanted something left here, permanently. Chase, who had just arrived and froze in the doorway at the sight of the uniforms, cleared his throat. "Wait. Is this a surprise inspection or something?" General Armitage turned, slowly, like someone deciding how much truth a man was ready for. "Do you know what Colonel Jacob A. Knox did in 1983? Chase shook his head. He took a unit into a zero-visibility mountain zone under hostile fire, rescued 14 pinned-down men, then held the line for 36 hours after the evac bird was shot down. Didn't lose a single life. Didn't ask for a medal. Didn't accept the commendation. Just returned, handed in his rifle, and said, 'I did my job. Now let me rest.'" Maya swallowed. "Why here?" The general nodded at her, softening. "Because this is the first place in 2 decades he said he felt seen." With solemn care, one of the officers opened the case and lifted out a framed medal, a Medal of Honor, encased in glass next to a photo of Colonel Knox, younger, standing between 2 fire-scorched helicopters with his arm around a wounded soldier. Beneath it, a brass engraving, "For the quiet who walk among us." Maya's breath caught. "He never said," Armitage gently interrupted, "that's how you know it was real." He reached into the binder and handed her a second letter, addressed in the same careful penmanship. "If they come, let them come quiet. No press. No trumpet. Just one wall, one medal, and one promise that someone will sit in that booth, see the frame, and remember that valor doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it wears a limp and just wants a cup of coffee." They mounted the frame without ceremony. No speeches. Just Maya, 2 baristas standing still behind the counter, and one trembling manager who couldn't seem to look at it directly. By 7:15, the officers were gone. No fanfare. No camera crews. But by noon, veterans began arriving one at a time in silence. Some in faded hats. Some with canes. Some with only memories. And when they sat in that booth, no one rushed them. No one interrupted. They just let them be. One old woman left a Purple Heart pen on the table. A young man in a National Guard hoodie saluted before sitting. Maya printed a permanent order button on the register called Colonel's Coffee Black, no sugar, no cream. Every time it rang, she smiled. Then, 2 months later, a letter arrived. A legal envelope, stamped with official Army channels, marked Testament, J. Knox. Maya opened it slowly and found a notarized document, handwritten again, with one final gift. To Maya Rivera, who gave me a glass of water and more dignity than most gave in a lifetime. I leave my notebook, my field map, and the flag from Operation Timberite. Because you watched before others knew to look. You saluted me with silence. That's the salute that matters most. The notebook arrived the next day in a small cedar box. Inside, detailed hand-drawn maps, mission logs, and on the last page, scrawled in faint pencil. Legacy isn't medals. Legacy is memory. That day, Maya added a small glass case to the wall beside the booth. Inside it, the notebook, opened to that final page. Chase never said much after that. He quietly stepped down from the manager position 3 weeks later. His resignation letter just said, "Some lessons you don't get to unlearn." He moved out of town. No one asked where. Maya eventually became the general manager. She kept the bench outside polished. She never removed the plaque. And every Veterans Day, someone unknown leaves a single white rose beneath the booth. Some say it's one of the old MPs. Some say it's Maya's brother. But most believe it's someone else. Because if you look closely, on the outer brick wall, someone etched words barely visible unless the light hits just right. You laughed at a man with a cane, and he left behind a monument you couldn't carry. And every morning before opening, Maya walks past that wall, past the booth, past the case. She straightens the napkin, pours the first coffee, and whispers, "We see you, sir." Then flips the sign to open. Because sometimes, the most powerful battles aren't fought on foreign soil. They're fought in silence, in parking lots, in cafes. And sometimes, they're won with a cup of coffee and a little bit of decency.